The heat rose from the red earth in shimmering waves, distorting the massive sandstone formations that jutted from Monument Valley like the fingers of buried giants. Margaret Callahan stood on the porch of her trading post, one hand shading her eyes as she surveyed the damage from last night's dust storm. The wind had torn loose half the shingles from the stable roof, scattered her carefully stacked firewood across the yard, and, most troubling, collapsed a section of the canyon wall about a quarter-mile east, near the old Apache Trail. Maggie was 32 years old, though the Arizona sun and 6 months of widow's grief had etched lines around her green eyes that made her look older. Her auburn hair, streaked with premature gray, was pulled back in a severe bun that did nothing to soften her angular face. She wore a simple calico dress, faded from countless washings, with a leather apron tied over it. Her hands were rough, calloused from work that had once been Thomas's domain. Thomas. 6 months in the ground, and still she expected to hear his footsteps behind her, his quiet chuckle at some private joke. Pneumonia had taken him in March, swift and merciless, leaving her with a trading post she barely knew how to run, debts she couldn't pay, and a loneliness so vast it rivaled the desert itself. "Mrs. Callahan!" A voice jolted her from her reverie. She turned to see Billy Songbird, a Navajo boy of perhaps 14, riding up on a paint mare. Billy often brought news from the scattered settlements and occasionally helped with heavy work in exchange for supplies. His face was grave. "Billy," she acknowledged with a nod. "Storm hit you folks hard." "Hard enough, my uncle's Hogan lost part of the roof." He dismounted, leading his horse to the water trough. "But I came to tell you, the collapse near the old trail. It's opened up something. A cave maybe, or an old dwelling. You should look before scavengers do." Maggie's interest sparked despite her fatigue. The trading post survived on what she could trade, and if there were salvageable goods in an old dwelling, pottery, tools, anything, it might mean the difference between eating and starving come winter. "I'm obliged to you, Billy. You want to come with me to look?" The boy shook his head quickly, something flickering in his dark eyes. "Fear? Superstition? That place? My grandfather says we should leave it alone, says it's been sealed for a reason." He glanced toward the collapsed section of canyon wall, then back at her. "But you do what you need to, Mrs. Callahan. Just be careful." After Billy left, Maggie gathered her canteen, a sturdy shovel, and a canvas sack for anything worth taking. The sun was climbing toward its merciless noon position as she made her way across the hard-scrabble ground. Lizards skittered away from her boots. A red-tailed hawk circled overhead, its cry sharp and lonely. The collapsed section of canyon wall was more extensive than she'd thought. Tons of sandstone had given way, revealing a dark opening perhaps 4 feet high. Maggie approached cautiously, remembering Billy's warning, but superstition wouldn't feed her or pay her debts. She crouched at the entrance, peering into the darkness. The air that wafted out was cool and carried a strange, spicy scent, like incense or exotic perfume, definitely not natural. Someone had been here long ago. Maggie lit the small lantern she'd brought and squeezed through the opening. The passage beyond was narrow, but tall enough for her to stand once she was through. The lantern light revealed smooth walls, too smooth to be natural, carved, perhaps, or worn by centuries of passage. The corridor opened into a small chamber, roughly circular, about 15 feet across. Maggie's breath caught. The walls were covered in symbols, not Navajo, not Apache, not any indigenous writing she'd ever seen. They seemed to writhe in the lamplight, geometric and flowing all at once. In the center of the chamber, half buried in sand that had sifted in through cracks over countless years, was an object that gleamed dully in the lantern light. A lamp, but not like any lamp she'd seen in the West. Maggie approached slowly, her practical mind cataloging details. Brass, heavily tarnished but unmistakably brass. The shape was bulbous, with a long spout and an ornate handle. The surface was covered in more of those strange symbols, inlaid with what might have been silver or some other metal. It looked ancient, impossibly ancient, and completely out of place in an Arizona canyon. She knelt beside it, setting her lantern down. Her first thought was purely mercenary. This could be worth something. If she could get it to Santa Fe or even Flagstaff, find the right buyer. Maggie reached out and grasped the lamp, pulling it free from the sand. It was surprisingly heavy and warm to the touch despite having been buried in the cool chamber. Without thinking, an old habit of cleanliness, she rubbed her thumb across the tarnished surface to clear away some of the grime. The lamp grew hot in her hands. Maggie yelped and nearly dropped it, But before she could let go, violet smoke began pouring from the spout. Not the grey or black smoke of fire, but a deep, luminous purple that seemed to glow with its own light. The smoke didn't dissipate, but instead coiled and gathered, growing denser, taking shape. Terror froze Maggie's limbs. She wanted to run, to drop the cursed thing and flee back to the daylight, but her body wouldn't obey. The smoke continued to pour out, impossible volumes of it from that small spout, until it filled half the chamber. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the smoke stopped flowing. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence. Then the smoke began to contract, pulling inward on itself, solidifying. Maggie watched in horror and fascination as it took form, a human form. Arms, legs, torso, head. The purple haze faded, replaced by solid flesh, and a man stood before her. No, not a man. Something that looked like a man. He was tall, over 6 feet, with olive skin that seemed to hold a faint, almost imperceptible luminescence. His face was striking rather than handsome. Strong features, a straight nose, high cheekbones, and eyes that were the same deep violet as the smoke had been. Those eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. His hair was black and fell past his shoulders, shot through with what looked like threads of silver that moved as if stirred by an invisible wind. He wore garments unlike anything she'd seen, flowing robes of deep blue and silver that seemed to shift and shimmer, as though not quite solid. On his wrists were thick silver cuffs engraved with more of those writhing symbols. Around his neck hung a chain of the same silver, and from it dangled a small version of the lamp she still clutched in her trembling hands. The being looked around the chamber, then down at himself, as if surprised by his own existence. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, with an accent she couldn't begin to place. "Centuries," he said softly, almost to himself. "It has been centuries." Then those violet eyes fixed on Maggie again, and he seemed to truly see her for the first time. His expression shifted, surprise, then something that might have been wonder. "You," he said, and now his voice was directed at her. "You are the one who freed me." Maggie's practical mind grappled with impossibility. This couldn't be real. She'd hit her head in the collapse, or the heat had gotten to her, or she was dreaming. But the lamp was still warm in her hands, and the being before her was undeniably solid, undeniably present. "What?" Her voice came out as a croak. She swallowed and tried again. "What are you?" A slight smile touched his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I am called Azariel. I am a djinn, what your people would call a genie, though that word carries meanings that do not quite fit." He gestured to the lamp in her hands. "And you, mortal woman, are now my master, bound to me through the ancient covenant, sealed in that vessel." "Master?" The word came out sharper than she'd intended. "I don't want a master or a servant or whatever this is. I just wanted—" She stopped, unsure what to say. What had she wanted? Money, hope, a way out of her loneliness? Azariel's expression softened slightly. "What you want or do not want is immaterial to the magic that binds us. You have freed me from the lamp, and by the covenant sealed upon it, I must grant you 3 wishes. 3 desires within the bounds of my considerable power that I will make manifest in your world." He moved closer, and Maggie instinctively stepped back, clutching the lamp like a weapon. He stopped, noting her fear, and something that might have been regret crossed his features. "I mean you no harm," he said quietly. "I cannot harm you, even if I wish to. You hold the lamp. You are my liberator and my jailer both." "This is madness," Maggie whispered. But even as she said it, she knew it was real. Every instinct she'd honed in 6 months of survival told her that what stood before her was genuine, impossible as it seemed. "Perhaps," Azariel agreed. "But it is the madness that governs both our fates now." He looked around the chamber again, taking in the symbols on the walls. This was a place of sealing, created by those who knew the old ways. They trapped me here, bound me into that lamp, as punishment for— He paused, and something ancient and painful flickered in his eyes. "For crimes I committed long ago, when the world was younger." Maggie's fear was slowly being replaced by cautious curiosity. How long have I been imprisoned?" he considered. "By your calendar, nearly 800 years. I was bound in the year 1087 by the reckoning of the faith that then held sway over the lands where I once walked. 800 years. The number was incomprehensible, and in all that time no one found you. The chamber was sealed, hidden, protected by magics that would turn away most seekers. But time erodes all things, even magic. And last night's storm, he gestured toward the collapsed entrance. Fate, perhaps, or simply the inexorable decay of all things. They stood in silence for a moment, Maggie trying to process what her life had just become. Azariel seeming content to simply exist in space and time again after his centuries of imprisonment. Finally, Maggie found her voice. These wishes, there are rules, I suppose, things you can't do. Azariel nodded slowly. You are wiser than most who have held the lamp. Yes, there are rules, ancient and inviolable. I cannot kill, though I can harm. I cannot create true love, though I can inspire desire. I cannot bring back the dead, though I can extend life. I cannot grant immortality, though I can offer years beyond counting. And I cannot grant more wishes. The number is fixed at 3, sealed by the covenant itself. He moved closer again, and this time Maggie held her ground. Up close she could see that his eyes weren't simply violet. They held depths of color, shifting purples and blues, like looking into a twilight sky. But within those bounds, he continued softly, my power is vast. Wealth, knowledge, vengeance, transformation. Nearly anything you can imagine I can make real. Choose carefully, Maggie Callahan. 3 wishes may seem generous, but I have seen countless mortals waste them on impulse and live to regret their choices. You know my name. The lamp shows me certain things, enough to know who holds it, what lies in their heart. You are a widow. You are alone. You struggle against debts and drought and the weight of a life you never asked for. His gaze was penetrating, too knowing, and you are stronger than you believe yourself to be. Maggie felt heat rise to her cheeks, part anger, part something else. You don't know anything about me. Perhaps not, but I will learn if you keep the lamp. And you will learn about me whether you wish to or not. We are bound now until you make your 3 wishes or until you die, whichever comes first. The casual mention of her death sent a chill through her despite the chamber's warmth. And what happens to you when I die? Or when I've made my wishes? When you die or relinquish the lamp, it will vanish from this place and reappear somewhere else, in some other time, waiting for another liberator. He paused. And when you have made your 3 wishes, I will return to the lamp, back into the prison of smoke and dreams and timeless darkness, until someone else frees me centuries hence. There was such profound sadness in his voice that Maggie felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. To be conscious through all those centuries of imprisonment, alone in the dark, that's cruel, she said quietly. Azariel looked at her with surprise, as if such a sentiment from a mortal was unexpected. It is justice of a kind. I told you I was imprisoned for crimes I do not claim to be innocent. What did you do? His expression closed off, became distant. That is a story for another time. If there is another time. He gestured toward the entrance. The day grows late and you should return to your dwelling. This place is not safe after dark. The collapse may have disturbed more than just my prison. Maggie realized he was right. The light filtering through the entrance had taken on the golden quality of late afternoon. She'd been in the chamber longer than she'd thought. Will you? She hesitated, unsure what she was even asking. Will you come with me? To the trading post? I go where the lamp goes, Azariel said simply. I am bound to it, and to its keeper. I will follow, seen or unseen as you prefer. The thought of this impossible being at her isolated trading post should have terrified her. Instead, after 6 months of crushing loneliness, Maggie felt something she hadn't experienced since Thomas died. A spark of curiosity about what tomorrow might bring. I suppose you should come then, she said, tucking the lamp carefully into her canvas sack. Though I have no idea how I'm going to explain you if anyone comes by. Most mortals cannot see me unless I will it, Azariel replied. Unless you wish otherwise, I will remain visible only to you. They made their way out of the chamber and back into the late afternoon heat. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sandstone monuments in shades of gold and crimson. Maggie headed back toward the trading post, acutely aware of Azariel walking beside her, his robes somehow never gathering dust despite the sandy ground. You're not affected by the heat, she observed. I am not entirely physical, though I can be when I choose. Heat and cold, hunger and thirst, these are not concerns for me. He paused, though I remember what they felt like from before. Before you became a djinn, before I was bound. I was different then, more human perhaps, though never entirely mortal. He looked at her sidelong. You are very calm about all this. Maggie let out a short, humorless laugh. Am I? Inside I feel like I'm screaming, but screaming won't fix my roof or fill my well or... She stopped abruptly. Or ease your loneliness, Azariel finished quietly. She didn't respond to that, but something in her chest tightened. They walked the rest of the way in silence. The trading post looked even more ramshackle in the evening light. Maggie saw it suddenly through Azariel's eyes. The peeling paint, the sagging porch, the well with its dried-up bucket, the corral fence that needed mending. Everything spoke of decline, of a losing battle against the harsh land. Hey, it's not much, she said defensively. It is yours, Azariel replied. That alone gives it value. Inside, the trading post was dim and cluttered. Shelves lined the walls, half empty of goods. A counter separated the store area from the living quarters beyond. A single room with a bed, a stove, a table, and little else. Maggie set the lamp carefully on the counter, then moved to light the oil lamps that hung from the ceiling. Warm light filled the space, chasing back the shadows. Azariel stood in the center of the room, looking around with interest. His eyes lingered on small details. A photograph of Maggie and Thomas on their wedding day, a dried flower in a jar, a child's toy horse that had been left behind by a customer and never claimed. You have known loss, he said softly. It wasn't a question. Everyone out here has known loss, Maggie replied, her voice sharp. Then, more quietly, but yes, I've known it. She busied herself at the stove, building up the fire, putting on coffee. Ordinary tasks, familiar routines. They helped ground her in reality, even as that reality had just expanded to include the impossible. Azariel moved to the window, looking out at the darkening valley. You are in danger here, you know. A woman alone in an isolated place. There are those who would take advantage. I manage. Do you? He turned to face her. Your well is nearly dry. Your stores are depleted. Winter will come and you are not prepared. And there is a man... He paused as if listening to something she couldn't hear. Yes, a man who watches this place with covetous eyes. Silas Cord. He wants your land. Maggie's hands stilled on the coffee pot. How do you know that name? The lamp shows me things. Threats to its keeper, mostly. This Cord, he is dangerous. He will not be denied much longer. It was true. Silas Cord had been circling like a vulture for months, making increasingly aggressive offers to buy her out. The last time he'd visited, just 2 weeks ago, his friendly demeanor had slipped enough to show the threat beneath. I'm not selling, Maggie said firmly. This place, Thomas and I built this together. It's all I have left of him. Azariel was quiet for a moment. Then, you could wish him back. The words struck her like a physical blow. Maggie gripped the edge of the stove, her knuckles white. You said you couldn't bring back the dead. I said I could not truly resurrect them, but I could create a perfect simulacrum, something that walks and talks and remembers exactly as he did, something that would love you as he loved you. Azariel's voice was carefully neutral. Many have made such wishes. Whether they found comfort or horror in the result varied. Maggie closed her eyes, fighting against the desperate hope that surged in her chest. Thomas, to see him again, to hear his voice, to not be so crushingly alone. No, she said, her voice cracking. That's not... It wouldn't be him. It would be a lie. Perhaps. Or perhaps it would be a kindness. No, she repeated, more firmly this time. She poured the coffee with shaking hands, then turned to face Azariel. I won't use my wishes for that. I won't dishonor his memory by replacing him with some magical copy. Something shifted in Azariel's expression. Approval, or perhaps respect. You are indeed wiser than most. Many would not have had such strength. They stood in silence for a long moment, the only sound the crackling of the fire in the stove. Finally, Maggie spoke. What happens now? Now? Azariel moved closer, and in the lamplight his otherworldly nature was even more apparent. Now you decide what you truly want. And I remain with you until those decisions are made. I will protect you within the limits of my binding. I will counsel you if you wish. And I will wait, as I have waited for 800 years, for the wishes that will either free me or return me to darkness. How long do I have to decide? As long as you need, there is no time limit, save the span of your natural life. Maggie sank into one of the chairs by her small table, suddenly exhausted by the day's impossibilities. This is all too much. This morning I was just a widow trying to survive. Now I'm what? A wish-maker? The keeper of some ancient magical being? You are still Maggie Callahan, Azariel said gently. That has not changed. Everything else is merely complication. Despite herself, Maggie laughed, a short, sharp sound that held more hysteria than humor. Complication, that's one word for it. She looked up at him, this impossible being who had entered her life through no choice of her own. His violet eyes met hers, and in them she saw something unexpected, loneliness that matched her own. 800 years alone. It was incomprehensible. "Can you eat?" she asked abruptly. "Do you need to sleep?" Azariel seemed taken aback by the practical questions. "I can do both if I choose to manifest fully in your world, but I do not need to. But you can." "Yes." Maggie stood and moved to her meager pantry. "Then I'm making dinner. It won't be much, beans and cornbread, but if you're going to be here, you might as well eat like a human." For the first time, Azariel smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face, making him look younger, less ancient and terrible. "I have not tasted food in 8 centuries. Even beans and cornbread sound like a feast." As Maggie busied herself with cooking, Azariel watched, and gradually they began to talk. Small things at first. He asked about the trading post, about the people who came through, about life on this harsh frontier. She asked about his imprisonment, though he deflected most of those questions, and about what the world had been like 800 years ago. By the time they sat down to eat, some of the strangeness had worn off. Not all of it. Azariel would never be anything but otherworldly, but enough that Maggie could almost pretend this was normal. Almost. "What will you do?" Azariel asked as they finished eating. "About Silas Cord? I don't know. Stand firm, I suppose. He can't force me to sell. Can't he? You said yourself you are a woman alone, isolated, struggling. Men like Cord do not let such obstacles stand in their way." Maggie's jaw tightened. "Then I'll defend what's mine. I'm not without resources." "You have a shotgun in the back room," Azariel observed, "and you know how to use it. But against Cord and whoever he might hire? That might not be enough. Are you suggesting I use a wish to deal with him?" "I am suggesting nothing. I merely observe your situation." They sat in silence as darkness fell completely outside. Finally, Maggie stood and began clearing the dishes. "I'm not using a wish yet. Not until I've thought things through properly. For tonight, you can—" She paused, unsure. "Where will you stay? I need no accommodation. I can return to the lamp, or simply exist without form, or materialize wherever you prefer." The thought of him disappearing into the lamp, back into that darkness, bothered her more than it should have. "There's a spare room," she said. "Small, hardly more than a closet, but it has a cot. Thomas used it for storage. You could stay there if you wanted. To be human for a while." Azariel studied her face. "Why would you offer that?" "Because 800 years alone is enough," Maggie said quietly. "And because I know what it's like to be lonely. If you can be human, even for a little while, you should be." For a long moment, Azariel didn't respond. Then, very quietly, "Thank you." That night, as Maggie lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, she could hear the small sounds of Azariel moving in the next room, settling onto the cot, shifting, breathing. Human sounds from an inhuman being. Her hand reached out in the dark, finding Thomas's pillow cold and unused for 6 months. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered to his ghost. "I don't know if this is madness or providence or damnation, but I found something today, Thomas, something impossible, and I don't know whether to be terrified or grateful." No answer came, of course. But as she drifted towards sleep, Maggie could have sworn she heard Azariel whisper from the next room, too quiet to be certain. "Neither do I." Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Cord might return. The well was still dry. The trading post still teetered on the edge of failure. But for the first time in 6 months, Maggie Callahan was not alone. And in the darkness of the spare room, a being who had not felt hope in 800 years, allowed himself to wonder if this mortal woman, with her strength and her sorrow and her stubborn refusal to give up, might be different from all the others who had held the lamp. Morning would reveal whether that hope was justified. But for now, in the desert darkness, 2 lonely souls, one mortal, one eternal, rested under the same roof, bound by ancient magic and the thin thread of unexpected understanding. Maggie woke to the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she thought Thomas was alive, that the past 6 months had been nothing but a terrible dream. Then memory crashed back. The lamp, the djinn, the impossible reality of yesterday. She sat up quickly, her heart pounding, and reached for the robe at the foot of her bed. The trading post was filled with early morning light, golden and clean, and standing at her stove, looking oddly domestic in his flowing robes, was Azariel, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. "You're awake," he said, turning to face her. In the daylight, his otherworldly nature was even more apparent. The faint luminescence of his skin, the way his hair seemed to move with its own wind, the violet depths of his eyes. "I hope you don't mind. I found the coffee and thought you might appreciate waking to it." Maggie moved slowly into the main room, still half convinced she was dreaming. "You made coffee. I watched you do it last night." The process seemed simple enough. He handed her a cup. "Though I confess I may have made it too strong, I have no recent experience with mortal preferences." She took a sip and nearly choked. It was strong enough to strip paint, but it was also real and hot, and somehow that simple fact grounded her more than anything else could have. This was happening. The djinn in her kitchen was real. "It's fine," she managed. "Thank you." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Azariel moved to the window, looking out at the morning landscape. "Your well is dry," he said quietly. "I can hear it, or rather hear the absence of what should be there." Maggie joined him at the window, following his gaze to the stone-ringed well in her yard. It had been failing for weeks, the water level dropping steadily. 2 days ago, her bucket had come up with nothing but damp sand. "I know," she said. "I've been hauling water from the creek 3 miles east. It's barely enough for drinking and cooking, let alone for livestock or if travelers come through needing to water their horses." "You could wish it restored," Azariel said, his tone carefully neutral. "It would be a small thing, easily within my power. The aquifer beneath this land has merely shifted. I could redirect it back to your well with a thought." Maggie was quiet for a long moment, considering. A working well would solve one of her most pressing problems. But was it worth using one of her 3 precious wishes? "If I wished for that," she said slowly, "would there be consequences? Hidden prices?" Azariel turned to look at her, and something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "You are right to ask. The magic of wishes is unpredictable. I must grant what you ask for, but the manner of granting can be interpreted. A careless wish can bring disaster." He paused. "But a carefully worded wish, asking for something simple and specific, carries little risk. If you wished for your well to once again provide fresh water, I could grant that with minimal complication." Minimal, not none. There is always risk in magic, but in this case the risk would be small. The water must come from somewhere. I would redirect the aquifer. That redirection might affect other water sources in the area, though I would minimize such effects. Beyond that, he shrugged. A working well is a simple physical thing. There is little room for the magic to twist. Maggie thought of the 3-mile trek to the creek, of the precious time it consumed every day, time she needed for maintaining the trading post, for tending what few vegetables still survived in her garden, for the 100 other tasks that kept her barely surviving. "All right," she said finally. "I wish for my well to provide fresh, clean water again. Water from the natural aquifer beneath my land, restored to the levels it held when Thomas and I first built this place." Azariel nodded slowly. "Specific, careful, wise." He held up one hand, and violet light began to swirl around his fingers. "As you wish, so shall it be." The light intensified, then shot from his hand like lightning, not toward the well, but downward, into the earth beneath their feet. Maggie felt a tremor run through the ground, not violent, but unmistakable. The light disappeared into the floor and was gone. For a moment nothing happened. Then from outside came a sound Maggie hadn't heard in weeks, the splash of water rising in the well shaft. She rushed outside, Azariel following more slowly. At the well she grabbed the bucket and lowered it quickly. When she pulled it up, it was full to the brim with clear, cold water. She dipped her hand in, tasted it. Perfect. Sweet and clean and life-giving. "It's real," she whispered. "Did you doubt it would be?" "I don't know what I doubted." She looked at him, this impossible being who had just solved one of her greatest problems with a gesture. "Thank you." "Do not thank me. I am bound to grant your wishes. Gratitude is unnecessary." But Maggie heard something beneath the words, a loneliness, a weariness of being seen as nothing more than a tool to be used. On impulse, she said, "Nevertheless, I'm grateful, not just for the wish, but for the care you took with it. You could have twisted it, caused problems. You didn't." Azariel's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "No, I did not." They stood by the well for a moment longer, the morning sun warming their faces. Then Maggie heard the sound of approaching horses. She tensed, recognizing the rhythm of the hoofbeats even before she saw the riders crest the rise to the east, Silas Cord and 2 of his men. "Trouble," Azariel said quietly. "Shall I remain visible?" Maggie considered. Having a man, even an obviously unusual man, present might give Cord pause, but it might also raise questions she couldn't answer. Stay visible, she decided, but let me do the talking. Cord was in his mid-40s, a big man running to fat, with a florid face and small, calculating eyes. He wore expensive clothes unsuited to the desert, a fine wool suit and a silk vest that must have been sweltering in the heat. His two companions were harder men, hired guns by the look of them, with the cold eyes and worn pistols of men who sold violence for coin. "Mrs. Callahan," Cord called out as they rode into the yard. "A lovely morning, isn't it?" His eyes slid past her to Azariel, and his smile became strained. "I see you have company." "Mr. Cord," Maggie acknowledged coolly. "What brings you here?" Cord dismounted heavily, his men following suit. "Just checking in on my favorite neighbor, making sure you're faring well in these difficult times." He moved toward the well, making a show of peering into it. "I heard your well had gone dry. Terrible luck, that. Makes running a trading post nearly impossible." "The well is fine," Maggie said flatly. Cord's eyebrows rose. He looked into the well again, seeing the water level high and clear. His expression darkened. "Is that so? Curious. My information was that it had been dry for days." "Your information was old." Cord's attention shifted fully to Azariel, who had remained silent and still, watching the interaction with those unsettling violet eyes. "I don't believe we've been introduced. Silas Cord, proprietor of the Cord Land Development Company. And you are—" "Azariel," the djinn said simply. His voice was level, but there was something in it that made Cord's two hired guns shift uncomfortably. "Unusual name. You're not from around here." "No," Azariel agreed. "I am not." Cord waited for elaboration that didn't come. Finally, he turned back to Maggie. "Mrs. Callahan, I came today to make you an offer. A very generous offer. $3,000 for your property. That's twice what the land is worth, and we both know it. I'm not selling. Now let's be reasonable." "I said no, Mr. Cord." Maggie's voice was steel. "This is my home. My husband and I built this place together. I'm not leaving." Cord's affable mask slipped, revealing the ruthless businessman beneath. "Mrs. Callahan, you need to be practical. You're a woman alone struggling with a failing business in an unforgiving land. How long do you think you can last? Another season? 2? Eventually you'll have no choice but to sell, and by then my offer will be considerably lower. Then I guess I'll manage until then." One of Cord's men stepped forward, his hand drifting toward his pistol. "Boss, you want us to—" "No," Cord said sharply, his eyes on Azariel, who had moved to stand beside Maggie. There was something in the djinn's posture, a coiled readiness, that made even the hired guns hesitate. "Not today." Cord mounted his horse, his face flushed with anger. "You're making a mistake, Mrs. Callahan, a serious mistake. This land is valuable for reasons you don't understand. The railroad is coming through this area, and I intend to control as much of the route as possible. You're sitting on a potential fortune, but you're too stubborn to see it." "The railroad," Maggie repeated. "Is that what this is about?" "That's business, Mrs. Callahan, and business doesn't care about sentiment or widow's tears. I'll be back with a better offer, but my patience is not infinite." He wheeled his horse around. "Come along, boys." As they rode away, Maggie felt her knees go weak. She'd stood up to Cord before, but never with such obvious menace beneath his words. The threat had been clear: sell or be forced out. "He will not give up," Azariel observed. "I know." Maggie moved back toward the trading post, suddenly needing the security of walls around her. "But what can I do? If I sell, I have nothing. If I stay, he'll find a way to force me out." "You could wish him gone." Maggie stopped, turning to face Azariel. "Gone how?" "Dead. Driven away. Transformed into a beetle and crushed beneath my heel." The magic would allow any of those interpretations. Azariel's expression was unreadable. Many who have held the lamp have used their wishes to eliminate enemies. It is a common choice. "Is that what you think I should do?" "I think nothing. I merely present options." He paused. "But if you ask my counsel, no. I do not think you should waste a wish on such a man. There are other ways to deal with Silas Cord, ways that do not require magic, such as information, leverage, allies." Azariel moved into the trading post, Maggie following. "Cord is powerful but not invincible. He has enemies, debts, secrets. Find those and you find weapons against him." Maggie sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over her despite the early hour. "I'm a widow running a trading post, Azariel. I don't have the resources to fight a man like Cord." "No, but I do." He knelt before her, bringing his eyes level with hers. "I told you, I am bound to protect the keeper of the lamp within certain limits. I cannot kill Cord for you, but I can watch him, learn his secrets, use my nature to go places and hear things no mortal could access. His violet eyes held hers. If you will allow it. Why? Maggie asked. Why help me beyond the wishes? You said you're bound to grant 3 wishes. Nothing more. I am bound to grant wishes, Azariel agreed, but I am also bound to preserve the life of the lamp's keeper, for if you die, I return to the darkness for unknowable years. Self-interest, if nothing else, compels me to keep you alive. He paused, and something shifted in his expression. And perhaps after 800 years alone, I find I want to use what power I have for something other than granting careless wishes to fools. There was such naked honesty in his voice that Maggie felt something crack in her chest. This ancient, powerful being was lonely. As lonely as she was, perhaps more so. All right, she said quietly. Find out what you can about Cord, but be careful. I don't know what his men would do if they discovered whatever you are. They will not see me unless I wish to be seen. I am djinn, Maggie. We are smoke and shadow when we choose to be. He stood, and as Maggie watched, his form began to dissolve, not disappearing entirely but becoming translucent, less solid. Within moments, he was barely visible, a shimmer in the air, a suggestion of movement, nothing more. I will return before nightfall, his voice said from the shimmer. Do not open the door to Cord or his men if they return. Promise me. I promise. And then he was gone entirely, leaving Maggie alone in the trading post with only the morning light and the sound of water splashing in her restored well. The day passed slowly. Maggie kept herself busy with the endless tasks of maintaining the trading post, sweeping, organizing supplies, tending her garden. Twice riders came through, travelers needing water for their horses and basic supplies. The interaction was brief and impersonal, but the coins they left were desperately needed. As the afternoon waned, Maggie found herself constantly glancing toward the door, listening for Azariel's return. She told herself it was just caution, wanting to know what he'd learned about Cord. But deeper down, she knew it was more than that. For the first time in 6 months, she had someone to talk to. Someone who knew her situation, who had entered her life not to take, but to what? Grant wishes? Protect his own interests? Or simply to be less alone? The sun was setting when Azariel materialized in the corner of the room, making Maggie jump and nearly drop the plate she was drying. You startled me. My apologies. I am unused to announcing myself. He moved into the light, once again solid and present. His expression was grave. What did you learn? Much. Cord's plans are more advanced than you knew. Azariel settled into one of the chairs, an oddly human gesture. The railroad is indeed coming through this area. That much is true. But Cord has done more than simply invest in land. He has bribed surveyors to ensure the route goes through his holdings. He plans to build a town here centered on his properties and force all commerce through establishments he controls. That's illegal, isn't it? Illegal, but difficult to prove. The surveyors he bribed have already left the territory. The documents he holds appear legitimate. Azariel's eyes met hers. But I learned something else. Cord is in debt. Deep debt to dangerous men back east. He needs this railroad scheme to succeed, or his creditors will destroy him. He is desperate, Maggie, and desperate men are dangerous. Maggie's hands tightened on the plate she held. So what do I do? You have 3 options as I see it. First, you could sell to him. Take his money and leave. Find a new life elsewhere. Second, you could fight him legally. Expose his bribes, contest his claims. But that would require money for lawyers, time you may not have, and success is far from guaranteed. He paused. Third, you could use your wishes. To do what? To protect yourself. To gain leverage. To... He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. To ensure that when the railroad comes, you are the one who profits, not Cord. It was tempting. So tempting. But Maggie had already used 1 wish and she had only 2 remaining. The thought of spending them all and returning Azariel to his centuries of darkness made her chest tighten with an emotion she didn't want to examine too closely. I need time to think, she said. Time is a luxury you may not have. Cord struck me as a man at the end of his patience. Then I'll be careful. But I'm not making wishes in haste. She set the plate down and moved to start preparing dinner. You said you could taste food. Are you hungry? The change of subject clearly caught Azariel off guard. Yes, I find I am. They prepared and ate dinner together, falling into an easy rhythm that felt far too natural for 2 beings who had known each other barely a day. Azariel told her about the world he remembered from 800 years ago, a world of caliphs and caravans, of great cities that had long since crumbled to dust. Maggie told him about life on the frontier, about Thomas, about the dreams they'd had for this trading post. He was a good man, Azariel said as they finished eating. Your husband. I can see it in your memories of him. You can see my memories? Not directly, but emotions leave impressions, and yours are strong when you speak of him. Love, loss, regret. Regret? Azariel met her eyes. That you did not have more time. Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Then, yes, I regret that most of all. They cleaned up in companionable silence. As full darkness fell outside, Maggie lit the oil lamps and settled into her reading chair with a book, one of the few luxuries she allowed herself. Azariel stood by the window, looking out at the star-filled desert sky. It's beautiful, he said softly. The stars. I had forgotten how beautiful they were. You couldn't see them? In the lamp? I could see nothing in the lamp. There was only darkness and the echo of my own thoughts stretching on forever. The horror of it struck Maggie anew. That's torture. Yes, it was meant to be. He turned from the window. But I told you, I am not innocent of the crimes for which I was imprisoned. I do not claim to be a victim. What did you do, Azariel? What crime is worth 800 years of darkness? For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to sit across from her, his expression distant and pained. I loved someone, he said quietly. A mortal woman, much like you. It was forbidden. Djinn and mortal should not mix. Our natures too different. Our lifespans too disparate. But I loved her, and she loved me, and I thought that was enough. He fell silent, and Maggie waited, sensing there was more. I used my power to extend her life, he continued, to keep her with me, year after year, decade after decade. I told myself it was what she wanted, and perhaps at first it was. But time is cruel to mortals, Maggie. Their minds are not meant for such spans. She began to fade, to forget who she was, to become something less than human. His voice had gone hollow, haunted. By the time I realized what I had done, it was too late. She was trapped in a body that would not die, with a mind that had long since shattered. The elders of my kind found me. They judged me, and they sealed me in the lamp as punishment, to spend eternity granting others the wishes I had so carelessly used, to destroy the one I loved. Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. That's horrible, for both of you. Yes, it was. Azariel looked at her. So you see, when I counsel you to be careful with your wishes, it comes from bitter experience. Magic is power, but power without wisdom is devastation. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of his confession hanging between them. Finally Maggie spoke. Thank you for telling me. Why do you thank me? Because it cost you something to share that, and because it helps me understand. She closed her book. You're not just a djinn or a wish granter. You're a person who made mistakes and paid for them. That makes you more real to me. Azariel studied her face. You are unlike any mortal I have known, Maggie Callahan. Most see only what I can give them. You see me. Maybe that's because I know what it's like to be lonely. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to examine. Finally, Maggie stood. I should sleep. Tomorrow I need to ride into town, see about trading some of my preserved goods for supplies. Will you be all right here? I need no caretaker, Maggie. I have existed for thousands of years. She smiled slightly. That's not what I asked. His expression softened. I will be fine. And I will watch over this place while you are gone. Cord will not move against you in town. Too many witnesses. But if he tries anything here, he will find the trading post well defended. Maggie nodded and moved toward her bedroom. At the door, she paused. Azariel, that woman you loved, what was her name? Liana, he said softly. Her name was Liana. I'm sorry for what happened to her, and to you. As am I. Every day of my existence, I am sorry. Maggie went to bed but couldn't sleep for a long time. She lay in the darkness, thinking about Azariel's story, about Cord's threats, about the impossible situation her life had become. Through the thin wall, she could hear Azariel moving in the spare room, another night of choosing humanity over the endless dark of the lamp. She thought about the two wishes she still held, about what she might ask for, about what price any wish might exact. And she thought about the djinn in the next room, lonely and ancient and bound to her by magic he hadn't chosen. What would happen when her wishes were made? Would he simply disappear back into darkness, leaving her alone again? The thought troubled her more than it should. Outside, the desert night was still and clear. Stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance, and in town, 15 miles away, Silas Cord sat in his office, studying maps and making plans that would change everything. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Maggie and Azariel rested, two lost souls finding unexpected solace in each other's presence, bound together by magic and circumstance, and something neither was ready to name. Sleep finally came, bringing dreams of smoke and starlight, of wishes made and wishes deferred, of connections that defied all reason, and laws both mortal and mystical. The well was full again. It was a start. The town of Red Rock was 15 miles southwest of Maggie's trading post, nestled in a valley where 3 trails converged. It wasn't much. A main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a handful of side streets, maybe 300 souls on a good day. But it had a general store, a bank, a telegraph office, and a small marshal's office, which made it the center of civilization for miles around. Maggie rode in on a bay mare she'd named Copper, her saddlebags filled with preserved fruits and dried herbs. She hoped to trade for flour, salt, and ammunition. Azariel rode beside her, though she'd asked him to remain invisible once they reached town. The fewer questions raised about her mysterious companion, the better. "I still think this is unwise," Azariel said as they approached the outskirts. "Cord has eyes everywhere. You'll be vulnerable." "I've been coming to this town for 3 years," Maggie replied. "I know these people. Some of them, anyway. I'll be fine." "Famous last words," Azariel muttered, but as they passed the first buildings, his form shimmered and faded from sight. Maggie could still feel his presence, a warmth at her side, a sense of not being alone. It was oddly comforting. Main Street was busy with the usual mix of ranchers, miners, and travelers. Maggie tied Copper to the hitching post outside Henderson's general store and gathered her saddlebags. As she climbed the steps to the store, she felt the familiar weight of eyes on her. The widow Callahan, object of pity and speculation. She kept her chin up and pushed through the door. The store was dim and crowded with goods, barrels of flour and sugar, shelves of canned goods, tools hanging from the rafters, bolts of fabric stacked on a back counter. Behind the main counter stood Ephraim Henderson, a grizzled man in his 60s with kind eyes and a careful manner. "Mrs. Callahan," he greeted her with a nod. "Been a few weeks since you've been in." "Had some trouble with my well," Maggie said, setting her saddlebags on the counter. "But it's fixed now. I brought preserved peaches, apricots, and dried sage and thyme, hoping to trade for staples." Henderson examined her goods with a practiced eye. "Quality work, as always. Your Thomas taught you well." He named a fair price in trade, and they began gathering what Maggie needed. Flour, salt, coffee, ammunition for her shotgun, a few other necessities. As Henderson tallied everything, the door opened behind Maggie. She turned to see Marshal Tom Brennan, a lean man in his 40s with a weathered face and eyes that missed little. "Mrs. Callahan," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Good to see you in town." "Marshal?" Brennan moved to the counter, his expression troubled. "I was hoping I might have a word with you. Private-like, if you have a moment." Maggie's stomach tightened, but she nodded. "Of course." They stepped outside, leaving Henderson to finish packing her supplies. The street was hot and dusty, the midday sun brutal. Brennan led her to the shade of the store's awning. "I'll be straight with you," he said quietly. "Silas Cord came to see me yesterday. Made some serious allegations about your property." "What kind of allegations?" "Claims your husband's original land claim has irregularities. Says the boundaries were never properly surveyed. That part of your property actually falls within a parcel he owns." Brennan's expression was apologetic. "He's demanding I investigate, possibly force you off the disputed land." Maggie felt cold despite the heat. "That's absurd. Thomas and I filed everything properly. We have the deed." "I know. And I told Cord I'd need to see proof before I took any action. But he's got lawyers, Mrs. Callahan. Expensive ones. And he's putting pressure on the territorial governor's office." Brennan shifted uncomfortably. "I'm on your side in this. But if he can produce documents that look legitimate, my hands might be tied. So what do I do? Get yourself a lawyer, a good one. Fight this legal-like. Because if Cord succeeds in court, there won't be anything I can do to help you." He paused. "And Mrs. Callahan? Be careful. Cord's desperate. I don't know why, but I can smell it on him. Desperate men do desperate things." After Brennan left, Maggie stood frozen in the shade, her mind reeling. A lawyer would cost money she didn't have. Fighting a legal battle could take months, maybe years, and if Cord had fabricated documents, Breathe, Azariel's voice said softly beside her, still invisible. We will find a way. His presence steadied her. She took a deep breath, then another. We need to find out what Cord's planning, what documents he has. Then let us do exactly that. Maggie collected her supplies from Henderson and loaded them onto Copper. Instead of heading straight home, she rode to the small boarding house at the edge of town where she sometimes stayed when business required an overnight trip. Mrs. Chen, the elderly Chinese woman who ran it, greeted her warmly and gave her a room on the second floor. Once inside with the door locked, Azariel materialized beside her. Cord stays at the Grand Hotel when he's in town, Maggie said. It's the biggest building on Main Street. If he has documents, that's where they'll be. Then that's where I'll go tonight. Azariel moved to the window looking out at the town. The advantage of being djinn, locks and walls mean nothing to me. I can enter his room as smoke, search it, and be gone before he knows anyone was there. That's... Maggie hesitated. Is that safe? What if he has guards? Mortal guards cannot stop smoke and shadow. Azariel turned to face her, his expression serious. But I appreciate your concern. I will be careful. They spent the afternoon quietly. Maggie dozed fitfully, exhausted from the ride and the tension of the day. Azariel sat by the window, watching the town go about its business, occasionally sharing observations, a drunk being thrown out of a saloon, a young couple courting in the street, the simple rhythms of human life he'd been denied for so long. As darkness fell, Maggie woke fully. She lit the oil lamp in the room and found Azariel still at the window, his form slightly translucent in preparation for what was to come. The Grand Hotel is 3 buildings down, he said. Cord is on the 3rd floor corner room. I watched him enter an hour ago. He dined in the restaurant, then retired to his room. 2 of his men are stationed in the lobby. How do you know all that? I told you. I can become smoke when I wish. I slipped through the town, listened, observed. It is easy when one is not constrained by physical form. Maggie moved to stand beside him. In the lamplight she could see the violet glow of his eyes, the otherworldly beauty of his features. Be careful, she said softly. Please. Azariel looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. You truly care what happens to me. Of course I do. Is that so strange? Yes, he said simply. Most who hold the lamp see me only as a tool. You see me as... He paused, seeming to search for words. As someone worth caring for. You are worth caring for, Azariel. For a long moment they stood close, something unspoken hanging between them. Then Azariel stepped back, his form beginning to dissolve. I will return soon. Lock the door and do not open it for anyone but me. And then he was gone. Nothing but a shimmer of purple smoke that drifted out through a crack in the window frame. Maggie locked the door and settled into a chair to wait. The night sounds of the town filtered up through the floorboards, raucous laughter from the saloon, the occasional bark of a dog, footsteps on the boardwalk below. She tried to read, but couldn't focus. Her mind kept returning to Azariel, to the way he'd looked at her before leaving, to the growing connection between them that defied all logic. An hour passed, then another. Maggie was beginning to genuinely worry when purple smoke suddenly materialized in the center of the room, coalescing into Azariel's solid form. He looked troubled. What did you find? She asked immediately. Documents, carefully forged, but forged nonetheless. Azariel moved to the table, and from within his robes pulled out several papers. Cord has created a false survey map, showing different boundaries than your legitimate deed. He has also fabricated correspondence between your husband and a surveyor, letters suggesting Thomas knew the boundaries were questionable but proceeded anyway. Maggie took the papers with shaking hands, studying them in the lamplight. They looked official, complete with stamps and signatures. If she didn't know better, she might believe them herself. This is fraud, she said, pure fraud, but it's so well done. It will fool most officials, yes. Cord has been thorough. Azariel's expression darkened. But I found something else. A telegram to his creditors back east promising payment within 3 months, and a letter to his lawyer outlining his plan. What plan? If legal means fail, he intends to force you out by other methods. He has hired men, not just the guards you've seen but others, rougher men. He plans to make your life untenable, burn your fields, poison your well, perhaps worse. Maggie felt ice in her veins. When? Soon. Within a week or 2 at most. He's running out of time, his creditors are demanding payment, and the railroad surveyors will be returning in a month. If he doesn't control your land by then, his entire scheme collapses. She sank into the chair, the forged documents crumpling in her hands. What am I supposed to do? Even if I show these to Marshal Brennan, they'll look legitimate, and I can't explain how I got them without revealing me. Yes. Azariel knelt before her chair, his violet eyes level with hers. Maggie, you have 2 wishes remaining. You could use one now. Wish for proof of Cord's fraud, delivered in a way that would stand up legally, or wish for his scheme to fail. Or wish him gone, Maggie finished quietly. Dead or disappeared. It would solve all your problems. Maggie met his eyes. Would it? Or would it just create new ones? If Cord suddenly disappears or dies under mysterious circumstances, won't suspicion fall on me? Won't his creditors send someone worse to take his place? Azariel was quiet for a moment. Then, you continue to surprise me. Most mortals think only of immediate solutions, not long-term consequences. You are wiser than that. I'm not wise, I'm just tired of problems that multiply like weeds. She stood, pacing the small room. There has to be another way, something that doesn't require magic, that doesn't leave me with more enemies. Then think, Maggie. You know this town, these people, use that knowledge. She paced in silence, her mind working. Finally, an idea began to form. The telegraph office. If Cord sent telegrams to his creditors, there will be copies. The telegraph operator keeps records. Yes, but he won't show them to you without cause. Not to me, maybe. But what about to Marshal Brennan? If we could give him a reason to investigate Cord, to request those records. Azariel's expression shifted to something like admiration. You want to expose Cord's fraud legally, using his own communications against him. Exactly. But I need something solid to give Brennan. Some evidence that doesn't reveal how I know what I know. She looked at Azariel. Could you break into Cord's room again, take something that would prove his intent without being obviously magical? What sort of something? Maggie thought hard. His ledger. He must keep accounts. If we could show he's desperate for money, deeply in debt, it would give him motive for fraud. Brennan could use that to justify investigating further. Azariel considered. It's risky. If Cord realizes his ledger is missing, then we need to make it look like an accident, or a theft, something mundane. Her mind raced. What if his room appeared to have been burglarized? Money taken, papers scattered, ledger among the chaos. Cord would report it to Brennan, and then the ledger would be evidence in the burglary investigation. Clever, Azariel said slowly. Very clever, though I dislike using my powers for common thievery. It's not common thievery if it's in service of justice. A slight smile touched Azariel's lips. You have a gift for rationalization. I prefer to think of it as practicality. She moved closer to him. Can you do it? Make it look like a simple burglary? I can, though I'll need to wait until Cord is asleep and the hotel quieter. Dawn, perhaps, when the night staff is drowsy and inattentive. They spent the rest of the night in uneasy waiting. Maggie dozed off and on in the chair, while Azariel kept watch by the window. Sometime near dawn she woke to find him standing over her, a leather-bound ledger in his hands. It's done, he said quietly. The room appeared to have been broken into through the window. I broke the lock from outside using my power. Cash from Cord's wallet is missing. Papers are scattered, and this ledger was among the stolen items. Maggie took the ledger, flipping through it quickly. The pages were filled with entries in Cord's cramped handwriting, debts to banks, to private lenders, to men with names that suggested they were not above using violence to collect. The amounts were staggering. Cord was drowning in debt. This is perfect, she breathed. This proves motive. With this, Brennan will have cause to investigate everything Cord has done. Then we should deliver it to him. But carefully. We cannot simply hand it over. That would raise questions. Maggie thought. What if we left it somewhere he'd find it? Make it look like the burglar dropped it while fleeing. The alley behind the hotel. I could place it there, make it appear as though it fell from a sack or a pocket. Azariel nodded. And then someone, perhaps you, discovers it and brings it to the marshal's attention. No, not me, that's too convenient. But Mrs. Chen sweeps the boardwalk every morning. If the ledger were just outside her door, she'd find it and bring it to Brennan herself. She's honest to a fault. No one would question her. Azariel's smile widened. You would have made an excellent thief, Maggie Callahan. I prefer to think of myself as someone who helps justice along. As dawn broke, Azariel slipped out in his smoke form and placed the ledger strategically near the boarding house entrance, positioned to look as though it had been dropped by someone passing through the alley. Then they waited. True to form, Mrs. Chen began her morning routine just after sunrise. Through the window they watched her discover the ledger, examine it with a puzzled expression, then carry it directly to the marshal's office. Within the hour, chaos erupted. Marshal Brennan, accompanied by 2 deputies, marched to the Grand Hotel. Raised voices carried down the street as Cord discovered his room had been burglarized. When Brennan showed him the recovered ledger and began asking pointed questions about its contents, Cord's protests grew louder. Maggie and Azariel watched from the boarding house window as Cord was escorted to the marshal's office, his face purple with rage. "It's working," Maggie whispered. "Brennan is investigating him." "The ledger alone won't be enough," Azariel cautioned, "but it gives Brennan cause to dig deeper, to request those telegraph records, to examine Cord's forged documents with more scrutiny." They were right. Over the next few hours, the town buzzed with activity. Brennan sent telegrams to territorial authorities. The telegraph operator was brought in for questioning. By afternoon, word had spread that Silas Cord was under investigation for fraud and attempted land theft. Maggie kept a low profile, staying in her room, letting events unfold. By evening, Brennan came to see her personally. "Mrs. Callahan, I thought you should know. We've uncovered significant evidence of fraud on Cord's part. The documents he showed me claiming irregularities in your deed are forgeries. We've verified this with the Territorial Land Office." Relief flooded through Maggie. "So my property is secure." "Your property is secure. Cord won't be bothering you anymore. In fact, he'll be lucky if he avoids prison." Brennan's expression was grim. "Turns out he's been running similar schemes throughout the territory. The railroad route information he had, also obtained through bribery and fraud. The company is furious." After Brennan left, Maggie sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. They'd done it. Without using a wish, they'd stopped Cord. Azariel materialized beside her, his expression proud. "You did well, Maggie. You used intelligence and strategy instead of magic. Not many would have had such discipline." "We did well," she corrected. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Perhaps, but the plan was yours. I merely executed it." He sat beside her on the bed, an intimacy that should have felt strange, but somehow didn't. "You continue to impress me, Maggie Callahan. 800 years of watching humans make wishes, and I've never met anyone quite like you." Maggie looked at him, this impossible being who had entered her life days ago. In the soft evening light, he looked almost human, just a handsome man with unusual eyes and an accent she couldn't place, but she knew what he truly was: ancient, powerful, bound to her by magic and tragedy. "Azariel," she said quietly, "what happens when I've made my 3 wishes? You said you'd go back to the lamp, back to darkness, but for how long?" His expression grew distant. "There's no way to know. It could be years, decades, centuries. The lamp travels through time and space according to patterns I don't understand, appearing where and when it's meant to. That's cruel. It's my punishment." He met her eyes. "Though I confess these past days with you have been—" I had forgotten what it was like to have purpose beyond granting wishes, to be seen as something more than a magical tool. "You are more, so much more." The air between them grew charged. Azariel reached out, his hand hovering near her face but not quite touching. "You are dangerous, Maggie Callahan. Dangerous in ways you don't understand." "How so?" "You make me hope, and hope, for one such as I, is the cruelest torment of all." Before Maggie could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. They sprang apart, Azariel fading to invisibility as Maggie moved to answer. It was Mrs. Chen, her expression troubled. "Mrs. Callahan, there's men downstairs asking for you. Rough-looking men. They say they work for Mr. Cord and they want to speak with you about your property." Maggie's blood ran cold. Cord's hired guns. They hadn't been arrested with him, and they clearly didn't care that their employer was in custody. "Tell them I'll be down shortly," she said calmly, though her heart was racing. After Mrs. Chen left, Azariel materialized beside her. "You're not going down there. I have to. If I hide, they'll only cause trouble for Mrs. Chen and the other guests. Then I'm coming with you, visible." "Azariel, non-negotiable, Maggie. These men are dangerous, and you are not facing them alone." They descended the stairs together. In the boarding house's small parlor, 3 men waited. Maggie recognized 2 from Cord's visit to her trading post. Hard-eyed men with guns worn low. The third was new, older and meaner-looking, with a scar running down one cheek. "Mrs. Callahan," the scarred man said. His voice was quiet, which somehow made it more menacing. "My name's Pike. Mr. Cord employed me and my associates to look after his interests while he's indisposed." "Mr. Cord is under arrest for fraud," Maggie said evenly. "Whatever he hired you for, it's over." Pike smiled, showing yellow teeth. See, that's where you're wrong. Mr. Cord paid us in advance, generous-like, and we always complete jobs we're paid for. It's a matter of professional pride. The marshal is busy with Mr. Cord. Besides, we ain't breaking any laws, just having a conversation. His eyes flicked to Azariel, assessing him. Your friend doesn't say much. I speak when necessary, Azariel said softly. His voice carried an undertone that made all three men shift uncomfortably. Pike's smile faded. Here's how things are, Mrs. Callahan. You've caused Mr. Cord a lot of trouble, cost him a lot of money. Now, we could make that trouble come back to you. Accidents happen on isolated ranches. Fires start. People get hurt. He paused. Or you could leave. Pack up, move on, leave this territory entirely. Do that, and we'll call things square. I'm not leaving my home. That's unfortunate. Pike's hand drifted toward his gun. Azariel moved. One moment he was standing beside Maggie. The next he was directly in front of Pike, though no one had seen him cross the distance. His hand was on Pike's wrist, preventing the draw, and his violet eyes blazed with an otherworldly light. You will leave, Azariel said, his voice resonating with power that made the lamps flicker. You will leave this place, this town, this territory. You will never trouble Maggie Callahan again, do you understand? Pike tried to pull away but couldn't. His face had gone pale, his tough guy demeanor crumbling in the face of something his mind couldn't quite comprehend. What are you? Your worst nightmare if you ever threaten this woman again. Azariel released Pike's wrist, and the man stumbled backward, his two companions catching him. All three stared at Azariel with expressions of pure terror. We're leaving, Pike said, his voice shaking. We're leaving right now. They fled from the boarding house like men pursued by demons. Through the window, Maggie watched them mount their horses and ride out of town at a gallop, not looking back. She turned to Azariel, who was breathing hard, his form flickering slightly between solid and translucent. That was necessary, he finished. They would have killed you, Maggie. Eventually, if not tonight, they would have followed through on their threats. I could not allow that. I know, thank you. She moved closer to him. But that power you used was minor, a suggestion, magnified by fear. I did not harm them, only frightened them thoroughly enough that they'll never return. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. Mrs. Callahan, what was that man? I felt something like a storm about to break. A friend, Maggie said firmly. A very good friend who was protecting me. Mrs. Chen studied Azariel for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then he is welcome in my house. Always. That night, back in her room, Maggie and Azariel sat together in the lamplight, processing everything that had happened. Cord was arrested, his men had fled, and her property was secure, all without using another wish. 2 wishes left, Azariel said quietly, and now you don't have the immediate threat I thought would force your hand. You could live out your life, never using those wishes, and eventually I would return to the lamp when you die. Is that what you want? He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw centuries of loneliness. What I want is irrelevant. I am bound, Maggie. My wants don't matter. They matter to me. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Azariel reached out, and this time he did touch her face, his fingers gentle against her cheek. You are playing with fire, Maggie Callahan. I am not human. I cannot give you the life you deserve. And what life do I deserve? One without magic, without complications, with a good man who can grow old alongside you. Maggie covered his hand with hers. Thomas was that man. He's gone. And now you're here, impossible as that is. I'm not asking for promises or futures, I'm just saying your wants matter. To me. They sat like that for a long moment. The djinn and the widow, both alone, both bound by circumstances beyond their control, both finding unexpected solace in each other's presence. Finally, Azariel pulled away gently. We should sleep. Tomorrow we return to your trading post, and we figure out what comes next. Will you stay? In the next room? If you wish it. I wish it. He smiled at her word choice. Then that is one wish I can grant freely without magic or binding. They retired to their separate rooms, but Maggie lay awake long into the night, listening to Azariel's breathing through the thin wall, wondering what she'd gotten herself into, and whether her heart was wise enough to navigate the impossible territory it was entering. Outside, Red Rock settled into quiet darkness. Cord sat in a jail cell, contemplating ruin. His hired guns rode hard for the border, still shaking from their encounter with something beyond mortal understanding. And in the boarding house, 2 souls drew closer together, defying the laws of magic and mortality. beginning to care in ways that would change everything. 2 wishes remained, and the hardest choices were yet to come. The weeks that followed Cord's arrest were the strangest and most peaceful of Maggie's life since Thomas died. She and Azariel fell into a routine that felt both surreal and deeply natural. Each morning he would make coffee, still too strong but improving. She would tend the trading post while he explored the desert, returning with stories of what he'd seen: a family of coyotes raising their pups, ancient rock formations he remembered from centuries past, the subtle shifts of the landscape that mortals never noticed. Travelers came through more frequently. Now that word had spread, her well was reliable again. She traded goods, restocked her supplies, and slowly the trading post began to feel less like a desperate holding action and more like an actual business. The threat of Cord was gone. He'd been sentenced to 5 years in territorial prison for fraud, and his creditors had seized everything he owned. But beneath the peaceful surface, tension simmered. Maggie was acutely aware of the 2 remaining wishes, of the unspoken deadline they represented. Once those wishes were made, Azariel would return to the lamp, to darkness and isolation, until some unknown person in some unknown time freed him again. The thought made her chest ache in ways she didn't want to examine too closely. Azariel never pushed her to make wishes. In fact, he seemed content with their strange domesticity, choosing to remain in human form more and more often, eating meals with her, sleeping in the spare room, even helping with repairs around the trading post. It was in these moments, watching him mend a fence post or carry water from the well, that Maggie sometimes forgot he wasn't human. It was 6 weeks after their return from Red Rock when everything changed. The day started ordinarily enough. Maggie woke to find Azariel already up, standing by the window looking out at the dawn-painted desert. Something in his posture made her pause. "Is something wrong?" she asked. He turned to face her, and his expression was troubled. "I've been sensing something. A disturbance in the fabric between worlds. It's growing stronger." "What does that mean?" "It means someone or something knows about the lamp, about me, and they're coming." He moved away from the window, his form flickering slightly, a sign of agitation she'd learned to recognize. "The magic that binds me also radiates a signature, faint but detectable to those who know how to look. I thought the lamp's protections would hide it, but I was wrong." Fear coiled in Maggie's stomach. What kind of someone? Another djinn? Possibly. Or a sorcerer? Someone with knowledge of the old ways, the binding magics. His violet eyes met hers. "Someone who wants what you have, the power to make wishes. How long do we have? Days, perhaps, maybe less." He moved to her, taking her shoulders gently. "Maggie, you need to use your wishes now. Both of them. Secure your future, protect yourself, and then the lamp will vanish, taking me with it. Whoever is coming won't find anything, and leave you to be found by whoever comes next. Someone who might not be as careful with wishes as I've been." She shook her head. "No, this isn't about me." "Yes, it is. It's about you spending another unknown span of time in darkness, possibly centuries, until someone else finds the lamp. And what if the next person is like Cord? What if they're worse?" Her voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "I won't do it, Azariel." "Then what will you do? If this person finds the lamp, they will take it by force. They will kill you if necessary." Maggie was quiet for a long moment, her mind racing. "Then, what if I wished you free?" Azariel went very still. "What? You said you can't grant freedom directly. You can't free yourself. But what if I wished it? What if I used one of my wishes to break your binding to the lamp?" "Maggie, no. You don't understand what you're suggesting." "Then explain it to me." Azariel pulled away, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "The binding to the lamp is ancient magic, woven by those far more powerful than I. To break it would require immense power, power that would have to come from somewhere. The wish would take its price from you." "What kind of price?" "I don't know. Years of your life, perhaps. Your memories. Some essential part of yourself. Magic always demands balance. To free me would cost you dearly." His voice was anguished. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. That's not your choice to make." "Maggie? How long, Azariel? How long have you been imprisoned?" He stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping. 800 years in the lamp. Before that, bound to other forms, other prisons, for centuries more. I have not been truly free since before I met Liana, since before I committed the crime that damned me. That's more than 1,000 years of punishment for loving someone." Maggie moved to stand before him. "That's not justice. That's cruelty. It's what I deserve." "No." She took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. What you did to Liana was wrong, I'm not saying it wasn't. But 1,000 years of torture, no one deserves that. And if I can end it, if I can give you freedom, she drew a shaky breath. Thomas taught me that sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing, and this feels right. Azariel's eyes glistened, not with tears exactly, but with something like them. You would do this? Give up whatever price the magic demands just to free me? Yes. Why? The question hung between them, heavy with all the things they'd been avoiding saying. Maggie took a breath and spoke the truth she'd been hiding from herself. Because in 6 weeks you've become more important to me than I ever thought possible. Because when I imagine you trapped in darkness for centuries more, it breaks my heart. And because, she faltered, then pushed forward. Because I care about you, Azariel. More than I should. More than is wise, but I do. For a long moment, Azariel simply stared at her. Then slowly, he pulled her into his arms. His embrace was gentle but desperate, as if she were the only solid thing in a world of smoke. I care for you too, he whispered into her hair, more than I have cared for anyone since Liana, and that terrifies me, because I remember what happened last time I loved a mortal. I remember what my selfishness destroyed. I'm not Liana, and you're not the same djinn you were then. No, I'm not. He pulled back to look at her. But Maggie, even if you free me, I am still not human. I am still immortal, still bound by the nature of what I am. We could never have a normal life. I don't want normal. Normal died with Thomas. I just want... She searched for words. I want you to be free. And if that means you leave, if that means I never see you again, at least you'll be free. That's worth whatever price the magic takes. Azariel touched her face, his fingers trembling. You are the bravest, most foolish woman I have ever known. Is that a yes? He laughed, a broken sound that held more pain than humor. If you're determined to do this, then yes. But we do it carefully. We word the wish with precision, try to minimize the price you'll pay. They spent the next hour crafting the wish, arguing over every word. Azariel insisted on including protections for Maggie, limitations on what the magic could take. Finally, as the sun climbed toward noon, they had it. Maggie stood in the center of the trading post, the brass lamp in her hands. Azariel stood before her, his expression a mixture of hope and terror, and something that might have been love. I wish, Maggie said clearly, her voice steady despite her racing heart, for Azariel to be freed from his binding to this lamp and all other magical prisons, to be granted the freedom to choose his own path and purpose, with the price of this wish taken in years from my natural lifespan, but not to exceed 15 years, and not to affect my health or vitality in the present moment. The lamp grew hot in her hands. Violet light erupted from it, swirling around Azariel in glowing spirals. He gasped, his form becoming translucent as the light intensified. The symbols on his silver cuffs blazed bright, then cracked, falling away like ash. The chain around his neck with its miniature lamp shattered, the pieces dissolving into light. The wind that wasn't a wind howled through the trading post, whipping Maggie's hair around her face. She held onto the lamp even as it burned her palms, refusing to let go until the magic was complete. Then, suddenly, it was over. The light vanished. The wind died. Maggie dropped the lamp, which clattered to the floor, now just an ordinary brass lamp, its magic spent and gone. Azariel stood before her, fully solid, fully present. He looked down at his wrists, bare of the cuffs that had marked his bondage, touched his throat where the chain had been. I'm free, he whispered. I can feel it. The binding is gone. I'm actually free. Then his eyes found Maggie, and his expression shifted to alarm. She was swaying on her feet, suddenly exhausted in a bone-deep way she'd never experienced. Azariel caught her as her knees buckled. How much did it take? He asked urgently, helping her to a chair. Maggie, how much? I don't know, she admitted. Her voice sounded thin, distant. I feel strange. Not sick, just tired, like I ran for miles. Azariel placed his hand over her heart, and violet light flickered briefly. Different now, no longer bound by the lamp's constraints. When it faded, his face was grave. 15 years, he said quietly. The maximum you specified. The magic took all it was allowed. Maggie did the math in her head. She was 32. That meant she would die at 47 instead of 62. It was a significant chunk of her life, but she was still alive, still herself. That's not so bad, she said, managing a weak smile. Plenty of people don't live to 62 anyway. Maggie, I meant what I said. You're worth it. She reached up to touch his face. You're free, Azariel, that's what matters. He caught her hand, pressed it to his cheek. "What have you done?" The words were anguished. "You've condemned yourself to an earlier death for my sake. I've given you a second chance at life. I call that a fair trade." They sat like that for a long time, Azariel kneeling beside her chair, holding her hand as her strength slowly returned. Eventually, he spoke. "I can leave now. I'm not bound to you or the lamp anymore. I could go anywhere, become anything." Maggie's heart clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "I know. Is that what you want? For me to leave? I want you to do what's right for you. You've been imprisoned for over 1,000 years. You should explore the world, experience freedom, not feel obligated to stay here because—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Because of what we feel for each other." She nodded, not trusting her voice. Azariel was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can I tell you something about my time with Liana? Something I've never told anyone?" "Of course." "I loved her desperately, but I was also selfish with that love. I wanted to keep her forever, so I used my power to extend her life without fully considering what that would do to her. I thought love was enough. I was wrong." He paused, his eyes distant. "When the elders bound me, I was angry at first. I felt unjustly punished. But as the centuries passed, I began to understand. My crime wasn't loving Liana. It was loving her selfishly, putting my desires above her well-being." "Azariel, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "You just sacrificed 15 years of your life to free me. Not because you wanted something from me, but because you genuinely wanted me to be free. That's not selfish love, Maggie. That's the kind of love I should have given Liana. The kind of love I've spent 1,000 years learning the meaning of." Tears tracked down Maggie's cheeks. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I could leave. I could spend my freedom wandering the world alone. But that's not what I want." He shifted to take both her hands in his. "I want to stay, here with you for whatever time you have. Not because I'm bound, not because I owe you, but because these weeks with you have been the happiest I've been in a millennium. Because you see me, the real me, and you care anyway, because you love me," she whispered. "Yes, because I love you. And this time I want to love selflessly. I want to give you happiness, not take it. I want to be here as long as you'll have me, and when your time comes, in 15 years or 50, I want to be beside you." 50 years? Maggie's brow furrowed in confusion. "But the wish took 15 years from your natural span. But that doesn't mean you can't live longer through other means." Azariel's expression turned determined. "I can't grant immortality, but I can give you health, vitality, protection from disease and accident. Not through wishes. I'm free now, but through what I am, through the power that's innately mine. I don't want you to use magic on me. That's what you did to Liana. No, this is different. Liana didn't choose. I forced extended life on her without her consent, and it broke her mind because mortal consciousness isn't meant for such spans. But what I'm offering is different, simply ensuring you live the healthy, full life you were meant to have, without the random accidents and illnesses that cut so many lives short." He squeezed her hands gently. "You would still age naturally. You would still be mortal, but you would have the years you deserve, not cut short by the cruelties of this harsh land. And you would have them with me beside you if that's what you want." Maggie searched his face, seeing the sincerity there, the hope, the love. "And what happens when those years end?" "When I die, then I will grieve," Azariel said simply, "as anyone grieves when they lose someone they love. But I will have had years of happiness with you. That's more than I ever thought I'd have again, more than I deserve. You deserve happiness, Azariel. We both do." He leaned forward and kissed her then, gentle and tentative at first, then deepening as she responded. It was a kiss that tasted of freedom and hope, and the beginning of something neither had expected to find. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Azariel rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" he asked, echoing her words from earlier. "Yes," she whispered. "Stay with me, for however long we have." They might have said more, but at that moment, the door burst open. Standing in the entrance was a man, or something shaped like a man. He was tall and angular, with skin that seemed to shimmer like heat haze and eyes that burned with orange fire. Power radiated from him in waves that made the air itself feel heavy. "How touching," the being said, his voice like grinding stone. "The djinn finds love. Too bad it's about to end." Azariel moved in front of Maggie instantly, violet light crackling around his hands. "Ifrit, what do you want?" "What do you think I want?" "The lamp, the bound djinn, the power to command wishes." The Ifrit's burning eyes swept the room and found the brass lamp on the floor, now empty and powerless. his expression twisted with rage. "You freed him. You stupid mortal girl, you actually freed him." "The lamp is useless now," Maggie said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her terror. "There's no magic left in it. Oh, I know, I can feel its emptiness." The Ifrit stepped fully into the trading post, and where his feet touched the floor, scorch marks appeared. "Which means I came all this way for nothing. Unless—" his fiery gaze fixed on Azariel. "You're free now, brother. Unbound. Which means your power is your own again. No limitations. No restrictions. You could grant me what I seek. Immortality. True immortality. Not the half-life we djinn endure." "I can't grant immortality, you know that. But you could come close, you could give me centuries more, millennia more." The Ifrit's smile was cruel. "Or I could take what power you have by force, kill you, consume your essence, add it to my own. Either way works for me." Azariel's stance shifted, becoming more defensive. "Sylvain, we were friends once. Don't do this." "We were never friends. You were always the favored one, the powerful one. While I scraped for every bit of magic I could find." Sylvain's form flickered, becoming more flame-like. "And then you got yourself bound, wasted your power, trapped in a lamp for 800 years. Such a waste. But now you're free, and I get to reclaim what should have been mine all along." The Ifrit attacked, fire erupted from his hands, shooting toward Azariel and Maggie. Azariel threw up a barrier of violet light that caught the flames, but the heat was still intense enough to make Maggie cry out. Azariel pushed her toward the back of the trading post. "Run!" he shouted. "Get out of here! I'm not leaving you! Maggie, please!" But Sylvain was already moving, incredibly fast for something so large. He flanked Azariel's barrier, reaching for Maggie with hands wreathed in flame. Azariel intercepted him, and the two supernatural beings crashed together in an explosion of violet and orange light. The trading post erupted into chaos. Shelves exploded as the combatants smashed into them. Fire spread across the wooden floor. The very air seemed to burn with the power being unleashed. Azariel was powerful, but he'd been bound for so long. His magic atrophied from disuse. Sylvain had spent those same centuries growing stronger. The fight was brutal and unequal. Maggie watched in horror as Azariel was thrown across the room, crashing into the wall hard enough to crack the wood. Sylvain advanced, fire coalescing into a blade in his hand. "I'm going to enjoy this," the Ifrit said. "And when I'm done with you, I'll take your human. She'll make a fine toy to pass the centuries." Something in Maggie snapped. This being had invaded her home, threatened the man she loved, and now stood ready to destroy everything. Without thinking, acting on pure instinct, she grabbed Thomas's shotgun from behind the counter. "Hey!" she shouted. Sylvain turned toward her, amused. "A gun? Against me? Oh, this will be—" Maggie fired both barrels directly at his face. The iron buckshot wouldn't kill an Ifrit, but it hurt. Sylvain screamed, stumbling backward, his hands going to his face where the iron burned his supernatural flesh. It was only a moment's distraction, but a moment was all Azariel needed. He surged forward, violet light blazing brighter than Maggie had ever seen. His hands found Sylvain's chest, and power poured into the Ifrit. Not destructive power, but something else. Binding power. "You want to be trapped?" Azariel snarled. "You want to know what 800 years in darkness feels like? Let me show you." The empty lamp on the floor began to glow. Sylvain's eyes widened in horror as he understood what was happening. "No, you can't. That lamp was for djinn, for your kind. Djinn Ifrit, we're similar enough, and the lamp is empty, hungry for a new prisoner." Azariel's voice was cold, merciless. "Enjoy your next 800 years, Sylvain. Maybe it'll teach you what it taught me." Violet light erupted from Azariel's hands, engulfing Sylvain. The Ifrit screamed, his form dissolving into orange smoke that was pulled inexorably toward the lamp. He fought, struggled, but the binding magic was too strong. Within seconds, he was gone, nothing but smoke being sucked into the brass vessel. The lamp sealed itself with an audible click. Its surface glowed briefly with orange light, then went dark. Azariel collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. The trading post was a disaster. Half-burned, shelves destroyed, goods scattered everywhere. But they were alive. Maggie dropped the shotgun and ran to Azariel, kneeling beside him. "Are you hurt? I'll heal. Being free means my power regenerates naturally now." He looked at the lamp, his expression complex. "I trapped him. I bound another being to the same prison that held me. He tried to kill us. I know it was necessary. But still," he shook his head, "the irony is not lost on me." Maggie helped him to his feet, both of them surveying the damage. The trading post was badly damaged but not destroyed. It could be repaired, rebuilt. "We should get rid of the lamp," Maggie said. "Destroy it, maybe. Or bury it somewhere no one will find it." "No." Azariel picked up the lamp carefully. "We'll seal it, protect it, hide it well. But we don't destroy it. Because in 800 years, maybe Sylvain will have learned what I learned. And maybe whoever finds him then will be as kind as you were to me." He pulled her close and she leaned against him, both of them exhausted. "I'm sorry about your trading post," he said quietly. "It's just wood and goods. We'll rebuild." She looked up at him. "Together, together," he agreed, "for as many years as we're given." As the sun set that evening, they stood in the ruins of the trading post, watching the desert paint itself in shades of gold and crimson. Azariel held the sealed lamp, which they would bury tomorrow in a place known only to them. Maggie leaned against his side, feeling his warmth, his solidity, his realness. "I still have one wish left," she said suddenly. "The third one. It didn't go away when you were freed." Azariel looked at her in surprise. "That's unusual. Normally all wish-granting ability disappears when the binding breaks. Maybe the magic recognized that I hadn't used all three. Maybe it's letting me keep the last one." She was quiet for a moment. "What should I wish for?" "That's for you to decide. What do you want, Maggie?" She thought about all she'd lost. Thomas, years of her life, her sense of security. She thought about all she'd gained. Freedom for Azariel, love she hadn't expected, hope for the future. And she thought about what really mattered. "I wish," she said softly, not as a command but as a simple statement of desire, "that we have time, real time, good time to build a life together. However much time we're given, I wish for it to be enough." Azariel smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, it was a smile untouched by sorrow. "That's not a magical wish, Maggie. That's just life. And yes, I think we can have that. I think we can have enough time." He kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon, and in that moment, Maggie felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness, of being exactly where she was meant to be. They would rebuild the trading post. They would face whatever challenges came next. They would live and love and eventually die, as all mortals and even freed djinn must. But they would do it together. And that, Maggie thought, was the greatest wish of all, one that didn't require magic to come true, only courage and hope and the willingness to open your heart to the impossible. As darkness fell over Monument Valley, two souls who had been alone for so long stood together under the stars, no longer bound by magic or fate, but by choice. And that made all the difference. 3 years later, the trading post looked nothing like it had the day Sylvain burned it. Azariel and Maggie had rebuilt it together. Stronger, larger, more substantial. The new structure had thick adobe walls that kept out the worst of the summer heat, a solid roof that could withstand the fierce dust storms, and a covered porch that wrapped around two sides, offering shade and a place to sit and watch the desert. The well still flowed clear and strong. The garden had expanded, fed by a small irrigation system Azariel had engineered, using his knowledge of ancient water management. Around the property, cottonwood trees had been planted and were thriving, small but growing, promising shade in years to come. It was late afternoon in October, the air finally cooling after the brutal summer. Maggie sat on the porch in her rocking chair, mending a shirt and watching the road. At 35, she looked healthier than she had at 32. The strain of those lonely months after Thomas's death had faded, replaced by the contentment of a life well lived. Azariel emerged from the trading post, carrying 2 cups of coffee, still strong but no longer paint-stripping. He'd learned to make it just the way she liked. He settled into the chair beside hers, his violet eyes scanning the horizon with the automatic vigilance of someone who had learned that threats could come from anywhere. "Billy Songbird is coming," he observed, "with his uncle." Maggie looked up and saw the 2 riders approaching in the distance. "I wonder what brings them out this way." As the riders drew closer, Maggie could see that Billy, now 17 and nearly a man, was grinning. His uncle, Joseph Songbird, wore a more serious expression, but nodded respectfully as they dismounted. "Mrs. Callahan, Azariel," Billy greeted them, his English much improved from 3 years ago. "We brought news." "Good news, I hope," Maggie said, setting aside her mending. "The railroad," Joseph said in his measured way. "The company has announced the route. It comes through the valley, just as Silas Cord predicted. But because his land claims were fraudulent and he's in prison, the territorial government has opened the route to legitimate businesses." He paused. Your trading post sits on what will become prime land, Mrs. Callahan. If you wanted to expand to build a proper way station, you could make a good living. Maggie and Azariel exchanged glances. They'd discussed this possibility many times over the past years. We've been thinking about that, Maggie said. Expansion would mean more work, but also more opportunity. We could hire help from the community, create jobs. Billy's grin widened. That's the other news. My uncle and I, and several other families, we were hoping you might consider partnering with us. We could help build a proper station, a place where travelers could rest and resupply. We'd share the work and the profits. A cooperative arrangement, Joseph clarified. The Navajo families have been pushed aside too often when development comes, but you and Azariel have always dealt fairly with us. We think together we could build something good, something that benefits everyone. Azariel leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. It's a generous offer and smart. A partnership would give us all more leverage when the railroad company comes to negotiate. They spent the next hour discussing details, how they would expand the trading post into a full-way station, with lodging and a larger store, how they would share responsibilities and profits, how they would navigate the complicated relationships between white settlers and Navajo communities. As the sun began to set, painting the monuments in shades of amber and rose, Joseph and Billy prepared to leave. There's one more thing, Billy said, suddenly shy. I'm getting married in the spring. To Sarah, Samuel Henderson's daughter. We'd be honored if you both would come to the wedding. Maggie stood and hugged the young man. Of course we'll come. We're so happy for you. After they rode away, Maggie and Azariel sat together in the gathering dusk, processing the day's developments. A partnership, Maggie said. A way station. It's more than I ever imagined when Thomas and I first built this place. It's what this land needs, Azariel replied. A place where different peoples can come together, trade fairly, build something lasting. He took her hand. Are you ready for that kind of growth? That kind of change? With you beside me? Yes. She squeezed his hand. Though it's going to mean a lot more work, a lot more people around. We can handle it. We've handled worse. That was certainly true. The past 3 years hadn't been without challenges. There had been a harsh winter that tested their supplies. A band of outlaws who'd tried to rob the trading post and learned that Azariel, while no longer bound, was still extraordinarily dangerous. Periods of drought that had them hauling water again until Azariel used his power to coax underground springs to the surface. But there had been joy, too. Simple joys. Mornings watching the sunrise together, evenings reading by lamplight, the quiet satisfaction of building something worthwhile. Azariel had slowly come to understand human life in a way he never had before. Not from the outside, granting wishes, but from the inside, living it day by day. And Maggie had learned that love didn't have to be ordinary to be real. That impossible could become every day if you gave it time and trust. As full darkness fell, they went inside to prepare dinner. The routine was comfortable now. Azariel chopping vegetables while Maggie tended the stove, both moving around each other with the ease of long practice. They talked about the partnership proposal, about Billy's wedding, about whether they should plant more fruit trees in the spring. Have you thought about what you'll do? Maggie asked as they sat down to eat. When I'm gone, I mean. When my time comes. It was a question she'd asked before, usually late at night when mortality felt closer. Azariel's answer was always the same. I don't know. Continue the work we started, perhaps, or travel, see what the world has become in all the centuries I was imprisoned. He met her eyes. But that's decades away, Maggie. You're healthy and strong. We have time. I know, but I think about it sometimes. You'll go on for centuries more, maybe millennia, and I'll just be a memory. Azariel set down his fork and reached across the table to take her hand. You will never be just anything. You freed me. You loved me when I didn't believe I deserved love. You taught me what it means to live instead of merely exist. His voice was fierce with emotion. When your time comes, and not for many years yet, I will grieve, I will remember, and I will try to live in a way that honors what you gave me. Tears pricked Maggie's eyes. That's all I can ask. They finished dinner in comfortable silence, then moved to the porch to watch the stars emerge. It had become their evening ritual, sitting together in the darkness, watching the desert night come alive with subtle sounds and movements. Do you ever regret it? Azariel asked quietly. Giving up those 15 years? Never. Not once. Maggie leaned against his shoulder. I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. Even knowing you could have lived to be an old woman, seen grandchildren, maybe great-grandchildren. I never had children with Thomas. That ship sailed long ago. And as for old age, she smiled in the darkness, I'd rather have 47 good years with you than 62 alone. Azariel kissed the top of her head. You're remarkable. You know that? I'm practical. There's a difference. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. It still amazed Maggie how much he'd changed from the ancient, weary being who'd first emerged from the lamp. Freedom had given him back something she suspected he'd lost long before his imprisonment, the ability to find joy in simple things. A thought occurred to her suddenly. What happened to the lamp? The one with Sylvain in it? Still buried where we left it, 3 feet down at the base of the Red Rock Formation a mile north, sealed with protections that will hold for centuries. His expression grew serious. Every few months, I check on it. Make sure the seals haven't weakened. Do you ever feel guilty, leaving him there? Sometimes. But then I remember that he tried to kill us both, and the guilt fades. He paused. Though I hope, when someone eventually finds that lamp, and someone will, centuries from now, that they're as compassionate as you were, that Sylvain gets the chance I got. That's generous of you. I learned generosity from you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, watching the vast expanse of stars. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out, answered by another. The desert was never truly quiet, just patient. We should sleep, Maggie finally said. Tomorrow's going to be busy if we're going to start planning this expansion. They went inside, through the trading post area to their private quarters. Over 3 years, they'd expanded the living space. A proper bedroom now, not just a back room, with a real bed and furniture Azariel had built himself. He'd discovered he had a talent for woodwork, another skill learned in his long-ago human life. As they prepared for bed, Maggie found herself thinking about the future, about the way station they would build, about Billy's wedding, about all the small moments that would fill the years ahead. Normal moments, human moments. Azariel, she said, as they lay in the darkness. Yes, I'm happy. Right now, in this moment, I'm completely happy. I wanted you to know that. He pulled her closer, his arms warm around her. So am I, beloved, so am I. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new challenges and joys. The way station was built with help from Joseph Songbird's cooperative, a substantial building that could house 20 travelers, with a large store and a dining hall. Maggie managed the business side, while Azariel handled much of the physical work, his supernatural strength carefully disguised, but incredibly useful. Billy Songbird married Sarah Henderson in a ceremony that blended Navajo and white traditions. Maggie and Azariel attended, watching as 2 young people from different worlds chose to build a life together. The parallels to their own relationship weren't lost on either of them. The railroad came through right on schedule. The way station became a crucial stop on the line, bustling with activity. More Navajo families moved closer, establishing their own businesses. The area began to grow into a proper town, one built on cooperation rather than exploitation. Marshal Tom Brennan retired and was replaced by a younger man who initially regarded Azariel with suspicion. His ageless appearance and foreign manner marked him as different. But over time, seeing how he and Maggie ran their business fairly and contributed to the community, the suspicion faded into grudging respect. Mrs. Chen from Red Rock came to visit and ended up staying, opening a restaurant in the growing town. She never asked questions about Azariel's nature, though Maggie suspected she knew or at least guessed. Some truths didn't need to be spoken aloud. Through it all, Maggie and Azariel built a life together. Not a magical life, not a fairy tale, but a real life full of work and weather, conflicts and compromises, small triumphs and occasional setbacks. The kind of life that mortals lived every day, made extraordinary only by the love that sustained it. 5 years became 10, 10 became 15. Maggie was 47 years old on a crisp autumn morning when she woke with an odd feeling in her chest. Not pain exactly, but a sense of limitation, of something winding down. She lay quietly for a moment, recognizing what it meant. Beside her, Azariel was already awake, his violet eyes watching her with an expression that combined love and sorrow. You feel it, he said softly. Not a question. Yes. How long do you think? Maggie considered. The feeling wasn't urgent. Not yet. Days. Maybe a week or 2. Not long. Azariel's jaw tightened, but he nodded. They'd known this was coming. The 15 years she'd sacrificed had been deducted from the end of her natural life. Now at 47, her body believed it was 62 and beginning to fail. We should call for the doctor. No. Maggie took his hand. There's nothing to be done, and we both know it. This is the price I paid. I don't regret it. I do, he said, his voice breaking. I regret that I couldn't find a way to free myself without costing you years. I regret every day we won't have. Don't. She touched his face gently. We had 15 years, Azariel. 15 good years. That's more than a lot of people get. And I spent them with you, building something worthwhile. That's enough. But even as she said it, tears ran down her cheeks. Because it wasn't enough. Not really. She wanted more time, wanted to see the town continue to grow, wanted to attend more weddings, wanted more quiet evenings on the porch watching stars, wanted to grow genuinely old with this man she loved. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of dying exactly, but of leaving you alone again. I won't be alone, not truly. I have the life we built, the people we know, the work we started. He gathered her close. And I have the memory of you, of every moment we shared. That will sustain me. Promise me something. Anything. When I'm gone, don't trap yourself in grief. Don't spend the next 1,000 years mourning. Live, Azariel. Really live. Keep building. Keep helping people. Keep experiencing all the things you missed during your imprisonment. I promise. But Maggie, and if you ever love again centuries from now, don't feel guilty. Don't think you're betraying my memory. Love is what saved you. Don't close yourself off to it. There will never be another you. I know. But there might be someone else, someone different, someone who needs what you can give. Be open to that possibility. They spent that day together, doing nothing special, tending the store, talking with customers, eating meals, sitting on the porch as the sun set. Normal things, precious because they were running out. Over the next week, Maggie grew weaker, not dramatically but steadily. She tired more easily. Her appetite faded. The life was slowly draining from her, as if through some invisible wound. Azariel never left her side unless absolutely necessary. Billy and Sarah came to visit, along with Joseph Songbird and many others from the community. Mrs. Chen brought soups and sat with Maggie, sharing stories from her own long life. Marshal Brennan's replacement, Marshal Carson, even came to pay his respects hat in hand. It was touching to realize how many lives they'd touched, how many people cared. On what turned out to be her last morning, Maggie woke to find Azariel sitting beside the bed, watching her with those ancient violet eyes. "Good morning, beloved," he said softly. "Is it?" She managed a weak smile. "It doesn't feel particularly good." "Then let me make it better." He helped her sit up, propped against pillows, and brought her water. Through the window she could see the desert painted in dawn colors, rose and gold and purple, breathtakingly beautiful. "I want to see it," she said. "The desert. One last time." Azariel carried her to the porch. She weighed almost nothing now. All the vitality burned away. He settled into the rocking chair with her in his arms, wrapped in blankets against the morning chill. They sat together as the sun rose over Monument Valley, painting the massive stone formations in shades of fire. It was the same view Maggie had seen thousands of times, but today it seemed almost unbearably beautiful. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For everything. For being real. For loving me. For giving me these 15 years. She looked up at him, memorizing his face one last time. "For teaching me that impossible things can come true if you're brave enough to believe in them. I should be thanking you. You gave me back my life, my freedom, my hope. Then we're even." They sat in silence for a while, watching the desert wake up. Maggie felt her breath becoming shallower, her heartbeat more irregular, but there was no pain, just a gentle fading, like lamplight dimming. "Azariel, I'm here. The lamp, with Sylvain. Promise me you'll check on it. Make sure the seals hold, and if someone finds it centuries from now, try to guide them. Help them give him the same chance I gave you. I promise. And the way station, keep it going. Keep it a place where different peoples can come together. That matters. I will. And," her voice was fading now, barely a whisper, "and remember that I loved you, not because of magic, not because of wishes, just because of who you are. I will remember. Every day of my existence I will remember." Maggie smiled, her eyes drifting closed. "Good. That's good." The sun climbed higher. The desert warmed, and in Azariel's arms, Margaret Callahan took her last breath and was still. He sat there for a long time, holding her body, feeling the terrible absence where her life had been. Around him the world continued. Birds called, the wind blew, the sun climbed toward noon. But Azariel was lost in a grief so profound it made his centuries of imprisonment seem almost bearable by comparison. Eventually, practical necessity forced him to move. He carried Maggie's body inside, laid her on the bed, composed her gently. He sent word to the community. Within hours, people began arriving. Billy and Sarah, Joseph Songbird, Mrs. Chen, dozens of others whose lives Maggie had touched. They buried her 2 days later in a plot on a hill overlooking the trading post with a view of the monuments she'd loved. The ceremony was simple, but well attended. Billy spoke about how Maggie had always treated his people with respect. Marshall Carson talked about her fairness and integrity. Mrs. Chen shared stories that made people laugh through their tears. Azariel didn't speak. He stood beside the grave, silent and still, while others paid their respects. When it was over and everyone had left, he remained. "I love you," he said to the fresh earth. "I will always love you, and I promise I'll live the way you wanted me to. I won't waste the freedom you gave me." The days after were the hardest. The way station still needed to run. Customers still came. Life didn't stop just because his world had shattered, but Azariel persevered, honoring Maggie's memory by continuing the work they'd started together. Weeks became months. The sharp edge of grief dulled slightly, though the ache never fully disappeared. Azariel found himself talking to Maggie's grave, sharing the day's events, asking her advice on decisions, telling her about the people who came through the way station. Billy and Sarah had their first child, a daughter they named Margaret. When Billy asked Azariel to be the child's godfather, he accepted, feeling that in some way Maggie lived on in this small person who bore her name. The town continued to grow. The railroad brought more people, more commerce. The way station expanded again. The cooperative partnership Maggie had championed became a model for other communities, showing that different peoples could work together successfully. And through it all, Azariel kept his promises. He checked on Sylvain's lamp regularly, ensuring the seals held. He guided the way station with the principles Maggie had taught him. He helped people when he could, using his power subtly but effectively. He lived. Not just existed, but truly lived, experiencing the full range of human emotions, building relationships, being part of a community. It was what Maggie had wanted for him. Years passed. Then, decades. Azariel, being what he was, didn't age. People noticed, of course, but the official story was that he came from a family with unusual longevity. It was thin, but people accepted it because Azariel had proven himself trustworthy. Eventually he knew he would have to leave. Suspicion would grow too great if he remained unchanged while generations passed, but not yet. Not while there was still work to do, while the community still needed him, while Maggie's legacy still needed tending. 30 years after Maggie's death, Azariel stood on the hill beside her grave. He came here often, drawn by the need to feel close to her. The trading post below had become a proper town now, Callahan's Rest, named in Maggie's honor. It was thriving, diverse, exactly what they'd envisioned together. "I'm thinking of leaving soon," he told her gravestone. "Billy's son is ready to take over full management of the way station. The town doesn't need me anymore. It's time." The wind blew across the desert, carrying the scent of sage and sand. Azariel imagined he could hear Maggie's voice in it. "Then go, live, experience the world. Don't tie yourself to one place just because of me." "Where should I go?" he asked the wind. "What should I do?" No answer came, of course, but Azariel found he already knew. He would travel, see what the world had become in all his centuries of imprisonment, help where he could, learn what there was to learn, and carry Maggie's memory with him, not as a burden but as a gift. "Thank you," he said to the grave, "for everything, for saving me in more ways than just breaking the binding, for teaching me how to be free." He knelt and placed a hand on the stone marker. Beneath his palm he could feel the earth, the bones beneath, the absence that would always ache, but also something else, a warmth, a presence, a sense that somehow, in some way he couldn't explain, Maggie was still with him, not as a ghost or a spirit, just as memory, as influence, as the part of himself she'd shaped and changed, and that would never fade, no matter how many centuries passed. "I'll come back," he promised. "Someday, when enough time has passed that no one remembers me. I'll come back and visit you, tell you everything I've seen, but for now," his voice broke, "for now I need to live, the way you wanted me to." He stood, looked once more at the gravestone, then turned and walked down the hill toward the town. Tomorrow he would leave, but tonight he would sleep one last time in the house they'd shared, surrounded by memories of love and laughter, of impossible dreams made real. The sun set over Monument Valley, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. And a being who had lived for millennia, but had only truly lived for 15 years, walked into the gathering darkness, carrying love and loss in equal measure, ready to face whatever came next. Because that's what Maggie had taught him. Life was precious not despite its brevity, but because of it. Every moment mattered, every connection counted. And love, real, honest, selfless love, could transform even an immortal djinn into something better than he'd ever been. Azariel lived on, century after century, never forgetting the widow who had freed him. He helped when he could, loved when he dared, and tried to make every choice one that would honor her memory. And though he never found another Maggie, there could only ever be one, he found purpose, found meaning, found reasons to keep going, because she had given him the greatest gift possible, not wishes, not magic, but the knowledge that he was worth saving, that he deserved happiness, that even ancient cursed beings could find redemption through love. And that gift sustained him through all the long years ahead, a light in the darkness, a compass pointing toward hope. Somewhere in the desert, buried and sealed, a lamp waited to be found. Inside it, an Ifrit named Sylvain began the long, slow process of learning what Azariel had learned, that true freedom came not from power, but from understanding, that love mattered more than magic, that sometimes the greatest gift was giving someone else the chance to choose their own path. But that was a story for another time, for another person brave enough to free what was imprisoned, wise enough to use wishes carefully, and compassionate enough to see beyond magic to the being underneath. For now this story of Maggie and Azariel, of wishes and freedom, of love that transcended the boundaries between mortal and immortal, had reached its end, and it was enough. The end.